3PNR with Adam R. This episode of 3PNR is featured on the UnX Network. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. Joining me for this episode is Rick Warner, ufologist. Rick, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Doing great. I'm glad to have you on. Glad to have your time. Let's open up with starting out with asking what got you down the path of ufology.
Well, if you go way back, I mean, it actually started when I was a kid. I mean, I always had an interest in UFOs and things like that. I was always kind of curious about that. But I remember at the time, you know, I was a pretty young kid in school, and I was with my mom and her friend, and we were in a town called Garden Grove in the state of California, Southern California to be exact. And we're driving around in a car. I remember we were right by the 22 freeway, which travels east and west. And I see, it's like I'm looking up in the sky, and right above the freeway there, I see what appears to be a saucer-shaped craft that hovered over the freeway. And then all of a sudden it like took off at an incredible speed. It was just like gone. I mean, the thing hovered around, and then it took off and it flew, and then it was gone. And I had asked them, I said, did you see that? I mean, everything happened really quick. So there wasn't even time to say, hey, go up and look at that. It just happened so quick, and then it was gone. But when I asked them about it, I mean, they were actually, how when you're driving the car, you really should keep your eyes on the road. Well, this guy that was driving the car, because my mom never learned to drive. But so anyway, she's the passenger, right? And he's looking over at her. They're having conversation. So they weren't even looking anywhere near the direction and seeing what I saw. And then all of a sudden, it was there, and then it was gone within seconds. And after that, it's like, I got really excited about it. I talked to them about it, but, neither one of them saw anything. And, back during that time, it's like, people would have thought you were crazy. I mean, if you're in school and you're telling about that. I mean, it's like when, they talked about, kids in school would talk about man's going to go on a spaceship and land on the moon, and they were ridiculed and laughed at. It's
right.
Kind of like, yeah, right. Like that's really going to happen. That you must be nuts. And then lo and behold, look what's happened since then.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because that was a thing then, right? The misinformation campaigns by our military, which I got to tell you, lately, I'm not vetted in this subject as most people are, or most of my guests. I got involved in it, relevantly later on, preferably after 2017 yes. with the reports. So I have the pleasure of looking back. I have to do a lot of research, right? And you hear about these people, like I was just talking about this guy last night, Richard Doty, and the misinformation he put out there. So much so they caused one person to, alleged to, cause this person to have a cease to his life. But the point I make is that translates to children, right? So whatever the adults say or do, it translates to children. So if it's nonsense at the top level, it's nonsense at the bottom level. It's a really poor way of having science, right? Because we don't know.
Yeah. Exactly.
And for you, when you're driving and you see that object and it's instantaneous like that, that has a profound effect on you. That's indefinite. That's embedded in your memories. So I could see that putting you down the path, because it would me. I personally have never witnessed anything other than one incident where there's like a bluish aqua colored, looked like a sphere or orb in the sky, but it's Florida. There was a thunderstorm out, so it didn't take off. It was just consumed by the storm. So I was left to never know really what it was I saw. And even that sparked that curiosity. And for me, ufology started as a kid as well. It was a very interesting subject. I watched the movie Communion with my mom, And it scared the hell out of us, right? The dog jumped on the couch, took us right out of our skin. And, you know, somewhere in my 20s, I lose that because, you know, you shoot and pool, you hang out with your friends, you get involved with whatever you get involved with. And then 2017 comes around, and those videos come out from the government. And despite what people believe, and if you could believe it, people still don't believe in UFOs. They think it's, their reasoning is beyond understanding. But after that, to me, there's no doubt. Our trained military, all through history, not just then, but all through history, have seen this. But now we have sophisticated documentation of it. And for me, that's solid. Now, the question is, who's behind the controls?
Yeah, exactly. Well, here's the thing. I mean, you have people that, you know, don't want to believe in pretty much anything. I mean, people are like, okay, yeah, you know what? I haven't seen it with my own eyes, so if I haven't seen it, it doesn't exist. I haven't seen any ghosts, so therefore, you know, there's no chance that any ghost could exist in a person's house. You know, I haven't seen God, so God doesn't exist. You know, I'm not saying I feel that way, but there's people out there, you know, that's the way they reason about things. It's like, well, if God's real, show him to me. You know, where is it? Produce it, you know?
I'm glad you said that because, exactly. I mean, if you think about it, organized religion is basically taking the word of a man who wrote something a long time ago. And yes, we have not seen God or any of these other, it's odd to me that in modern times, the miracles have stopped, right? So, I guess they're just done. And I'm not knocking religion. I grew up Catholic, but what I'm trying to say is what you're saying. It's a good point. You're saying UFOs aren't real. Meanwhile, there is more evidence, and Stanton Friedman was talking about this. I was watching one of his interviews. It's embarrassing the amount of evidence we have out there, outweighing the lack of evidence.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Well, I'll tell you something, and so, and you know, and then I'm just to tell you, you know, my background, and also for your viewing audience there. Okay, so as you know, I'm a certified UFO investigator, and I got my training through MUFON and went through MUFON University and studied a lot of different classes, you know, classes on astronomy and about space exploration and different things like that, and also how to conduct UFO investigations. And the training is always ongoing. You know, you're always learning, and it's quite a bit of material. You know, I didn't get paid working for MUFON as a certified investigator. It's a volunteer position thing. So you got to pay for everything. You got to pay for your books, you know, your training, you know, I mean, all that stuff. So, but the training is very good, no doubt. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, because a little bit in the beginning, I mean, I thought, you know, it's the first time I heard about MUFON was when I'm watching television, right? And they had these guys investigating this case. They were like out in, I guess, some kind of a warehouse or something. And, you know, on the hat, it said like, you know, MUFON, you know. So I thought, what is this? So I started looking it up and find the organization, coming to find out that they're the biggest UFO reporting agency in all of the world, hands down. They're international and over the U.S. Although most of the cases come from the U.S., you know, there's some that come from, you know, European countries and things like that. They just don't have a lot of these countries would prefer to. They have their own agencies that they would rather work with than work with MUFON. Right. But for the main part, you know, MUFON's, you know, it's been around a long time, doing a lot of cases. So, you know, I was a little bit skeptical at first about coming on board, you know, with this group of people, because when I talked to the state director, which is a really nice guy, you know, that I remember talking to on the phone about joining a local chapter and going through the training, and that's kind of the first thing. So every state has a state director. Some have an assistant state director, and then have some section state directors. Like for California, you know, you would have like the northern chapter, the southern chapter, and then you'll have like, you know, maybe certain areas, certain sections that investigators will cover. And when I remember talking to the state director, and he's telling me that you know, he goes, well, I don't even talk to my neighbors because they think I'm just plain nuts. Because he's talked to them about, you know, things that he's seen and, you know, studying cases and that kind of thing, investigating cases. And he had told me, you know, the more you get involved with this, the more convinced you are that there's really stuff out there. So in the beginning, I really didn't know what to expect. You know, when I went through my training and I met, you know, the chief investigator of our chapter, and I met other investigators and the state director and all that, I kind of thought like they were going to be like everything that is going to be investigated right away. They're just going to jump out and say, yep, that's definitely a UFO. Well, you know, I come to find out that wasn't the case at all, because the way they do things is every case is investigated very thoroughly, because you're gathering data, you're putting together information to arrive at an accurate conclusion. So they don't just want to investigate a case and say, okay, yep, that's definitely a UFO. It's not like that at all. As a matter of fact, what they state and other investigators state is that 80 to 85% of what people think is a UFO, unidentified flying object, which is now the more current term is UAP, unidentified area phenomenon.
Yeah.
Is that, you go out and you investigate these things, and they want to make sure that all the data is accurate when they go out and investigate a case. Because a lot of these things that people see can be attributed to either a man-made object, meaning the craft that you saw that was flying was maybe, a military plane of some sort, or, maybe it was a passenger, a small single-engine airplane, or a passenger jet, or some type of medical transport plane, or, that type of thing. And so, a lot of times it could be attributed to natural, man-made objects or natural phenomena, meaning like, it could be something in the weather, or it could be natural phenomena. It could also be like, let's say it was a star or a planet. And as an example, like the state director, that when I was with MUFON at the time, he had investigated a case, and he said that the guy, he talked to him on the phone. He's the guy saying, yeah, he goes, well, I'm outside, and it seems like wherever I move, I feel like this thing's following me, and it looks like really, really bright. It's this bright light, and it's shining on me. It's real super bright. And then when I move, it seems like it's around the trees. It kind of like follows me a little bit. Well, it wasn't that the object was moving. It was that he was moving. So let's say like you're looking at a star or a planet, and there's a tree in front of you. If you bob and weave your head to the left or right, it's going to make that object look like it's moving.
Sure.
When it's actually, you're the one that's moving. It's kind of like if you're looking up and you see a full moon, and it's late at night, and you're driving around through mountainous roads, going through all these twists and turns, and you go and you feel like, man, wherever I go, well, the moon was over here, and now it's over here, and you feel like it's actually moving, but it's not that it's moving from side to side. It's that your vehicle's moving, which is giving it that appearance of. Yeah,
and that can be said also for stars on the horizon, right? Then there's trees well off in the distance, and it's being, so the light that you're seeing is being manipulated by an object further away, especially at dusk. You can almost not make out what's there. And and
like in this case with this guy, he had found out all the questions. Okay, like, well, what time was this, and where were you standing? What location were you, and all that. And sometimes you can get to the point where if you have the exact GPS coordinates to where somebody's standing, and sometimes that information could be pulled off even from a simple photograph. The metadata of now it doesn't work with every camera, but some camera phones and things like that, people's cell phones that have that, there'll be what's known as a metadata that will list, what exposure the picture was taken at and that kind of thing. And also the coordinates, like where you were standing and stuff like that, which sometimes can be very helpful in a case. So it ended up being like this guy, he's actually looking at a star called Betelgeuse, which is a very, very bright star.
It's a very active star too when you look at it.
Exactly. And sometimes at first, like the first time when you see it, and I had heard about it, and I remember walking down the stairs, I felt like the thing was moving, like it was coming right at me. But at first I thought maybe it was a passenger jet, right? But then I just stood still and looked at it and not move. Sometimes it's the best thing to do, just stand still, don't move. And I watched this thing and I thought, okay, well, I thought it was moving. That's because I was walking downstairs, walking towards it. It made it feel like it was moving, but it wasn't. It was just very bright and it was just there. So sometimes planets and stars could appear as things. There's other objects, like things in the sky, like
when you look at Venus,
drones or paper lanterns, stuff like that.
Yeah, you look at Venus. Venus is a friggin' enormous part sometimes of the year. It's enormous. I remember. Oh yeah. I remember one time seeing it, and so I was living in Dunedin by the right on the bay, right on the ocean, and I saw it. I was like, all right, that's a plane. Eventually, it's going to fly over. And after staring at it for like 5 minutes, like that's not a plane. It's just sitting there. And so I had this app on my phone that identifies planet stars, and it was Venus. And I was like, holy shit, that is, I've never paid attention to that. That's absolutely bright. You know, to the credit of MUFON, I've had the pleasure of speaking to a lot of these people. They are a very well-organized group. And what I like about MUFON, from the person who was an experiencer versus the person who's had no experience and they just want to investigate, none of them approach these investigations with that hope, right? They're not looking for reassurance. They're literally out there looking for data and evidence. That's really what and I'd spoken to Doug Wilson. I'll have him on again soon. And so,
Douglas Wilson, he's Douglas Wilson, the chief investigator.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, that guy. It's funny you mentioned that and I know exactly who he is. I actually did some of my training through him. Really, really nice guy, very knowledgeable. He's actually like a lot of these state chapters have a chief investigator, but he's what you call the chief investigator. He's the national chief investigator over all these guys.
Him and I had a conversation about, proper gear, how to identify. I mean, listening to him speak, and I interview detectives. I interview a lot of police, I do a lot of off-podcast interviews with detectives. He sounds like a detective. So when I'm hearing him speak, his approach to these investigations are absolutely thorough. And
yes. Matter of fact, yeah. And he's been around a very long time, real credible thing. And I just want to put this out there because I'm sure some people are probably wondering when I mentioned that when I was with MUFON. I left the organization a while back. And what had happened was, now I'm not knocking the training because I thought the training was great. I was really happy with it. There's I met some nice people along the way.
Right.
But without going into too much detail, working as volunteers, we have to pay for everything. I mean, when we, they want us to have a field kit of all the stuff we got to buy. So in case we're doing a field investigation, which is only done during a class 3 case, which, you're out there on the ground at somebody's barn or their farm or house or whatever it is on the ground, taking soil samples or looking for hair samples or different things like that. And a lot of it is like being a detective, really.
Yeah. I mean, from what I learned, you got
to pay for all that stuff,
Yeah. And from what I learned, by the way,
out of your pocket.
Before we get further in that part about the field investigating.
Yes.
Because I don't want to forget this, but when I heard, and I hear this from every investigator, same thing. It's grueling. It's not, you don't go there, take some pictures. They treat it like a crime scene, straight up. So so people listening understand, like you're saying, these are people out there. So people put a stigma on MUFON. And like you're saying, they're not getting salaries. They're literally out there looking for facts, the best that they can. And I'm talking about even the ones that have had experiences versus the ones that haven't had experiences. They treat it identically. They go there for the facts. It's treated like a crime scene. But again,
exactly.
So continue on.
Here's the other thing too. So as investigators, okay, and the way I was trained to MUFON is that we always refer to the person's case that we're investigating as the witness. They're the witness. So, we won't like publicly put their name in a report. And, there's always like, what they do is they'll go on, people that have submitted a case on MUFON, they'll fill out what's called a short form. And then they go and answer a few questions and stuff like that. And with that short form, then there's somebody who looks at it after it's been filled out, and the case is given, a classification, or what they feel that this case should be, a class 1 or 2 or 3. And, and some are lower level cases and some are higher level cases. The higher level cases, the class 3 case, they want like, you contact a witness within 24 hours. If it's like a class 1 case, you have like a few days to contact the witness and do all this kind of stuff. Well, the thing is that, even if, there's a checkbox they could put if they want to remain anonymous, or, or they don't care if they're going to be anonymous, they don't care, who knows their name out there. Then, and even if the witness wants to be really get their story out there and things like that, just to protect them, we don't put their name out there, because by doing that, you can cause them problems. It could be maybe family problems, or with their job. Their job finds out that, hey, so-and-so person was, filed this case.
Even in their social life, it can cause an issue.
Yeah, it can cause an issue. So, and we don't even, and like even, some of the cases can be made available for people to read, but they can't get the specific information, like the exact GPS coordinates where they were. So usually the GPS coordinates will be put in like the city and state that they live in, not the GPS coordinates of their house address. Or we don't even put their house address. A lot of times you would just see like a city and address. Some people just leave the address blank. And you also don't want to, you don't want to contaminate the evidence, right? You want to keep the chain of custody strong.
So if later on, let's say 10 years from now, a similar incident happens in that right area, they have a reference point, and it's not been altered. It hasn't been smudged. It's in its pure form. And that's science. That's how you're supposed to treat it.
That's right. And I'll tell you, like, getting to investigating cases, sometimes, people's fears can play upon them, to make them think, people get scared and they're thinking that it was something that it wasn't. So what we do is like, sometimes when you go in and you investigate a case, you're not there to investigate the case and give the witness what they want. You come in there friendly and cordial and respectful, and you interview the witness, and you're very careful about how you don't want to lead the witness in any way by saying, okay, now it sounds like what you saw. Yeah, that definitely was a UFO, or, you're basically there to ask questions, but don't let them tell you their story. What exactly happened. Sometimes you have to go back a couple times and ask them again about, okay, now go over with again what happened at one time, and what were you doing before the sighting event occurred, incident.
I've seen samples of that. I've seen that on some of these bigger TV shows. Like, and it flew over here. Yeah, it had these lights. Yeah, like, yeah, I see what you mean. They definitely lead people. So it's,
well, that's the thing. I mean, and the thing is, if you're going to be an investigator, there's a lot of investigators that don't work for MUFON. They're independent investigators, or maybe they're with an organization. With myself, I'm the executive director for ERC, which stands for Extraterrestrial Research Center. And I'm also the director of investigations, and I'm also a founding member And then I have another guy that works with me who is the director of research, because he's, very good at doing research, that kind of thing. So, there's the two of us, but, we're a different organization. We're not like trying to be like MUFON, or we're not trying to compete with MUFON. We have our own, we're more of providing educational material and research material, and, putting cases out there for them to read about that were conducted and that kind of thing. And so any cases that do come in, if somebody files a sighting report on our website, we don't go out and just investigate every case, because you got to keep in mind that, MUFON, that's a huge organization, they have thousands of investigators throughout the United States, and there's a lot of chapters and that sort of thing.
Right.
So if you have a lot of cases coming in, they'll have so if you get a case that's in Arizona, it's not going to come to Pennsylvania or Delaware or something like that. It's going to go to, the state director for that state in Arizona there, and they're going to investigate that case. And then they, the state director will say, okay, let's give this case to, this investigator or this person, stuff like that.
Well, it's healthy to have multiple organizations. I'll tell you why. Just like in science, you have multiple universities. What's unhealthy is to have one dominant organization and you just take their information. It's good to have information come from multiple groups, and it's even more important for all these organizations to probably monthly cross-communicate about what they're coming up. I'm not saying hand your files over, but have meetings in multiple. I'm going to talk to some people at MUFON about that. Reach out to some of these investigative organizations, even like your organization, because if you have a monthly meeting and you break down the barriers, and I talked about this with Steve Murr, even with the paranormal guys, have a monthly thing where you have a meet. It's not a meet and greet. You're not there to eat food and drink and hang out. You're there to lay out a table of facts and see what you derive from it. You never know. Somebody in that room might have information that might pertain to your case. And if you collaborate, you have what they call a network. And it's the size of MUFON, and with organizations like yours and other ones, you could rival the government as far as resources, and with no money, I might add. It's just information. So,
well, here's the thing about the government. I mean, they is an example, going back to Area 51, when they said, oh, it doesn't exist. They always denied that it existed, and then all of a sudden it does.
Right.
But, the government is, when they don't want people to know things, they're very good at covering up stuff. They're good at covering up information. And what a lot of people don't know is that the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Defense, many years ago, they were conducting secret investigations on the subjects of UFOs. I mean, so if 80 to 85% out there that could be explained, I mean, I'd rather not say, well, you know what, everything that's seen out there is in a UFO. I don't want to do that, because to me it's fake and phony. And what kind of investigator will that make me? I want to be,
sure,
a great investigator and do good cases, like a detective who's very thorough and covers all its bases. So, if I see an orange, I'm going to call it as an orange. If I see an apple, I'm going to call it as an apple. But if I see it as an orange, I'm not going to say it's an apple, because you want me to say it's an apple. Sometimes what you tell the witness, your thoughts on something, and you don't agree with them stuff, sometimes they will get a little upset if you don't agree with them. So that's why I learned early on, when you conduct an investigation with a witness, of course now because of COVID, especially if you're dealing with a case that's far away from where you live, most of the cases that involve, starting out with interviewing the witness and that sort of thing,
right,
is done over the phone. But, you can't, sometimes they'll ask you okay, well, what do you think this is? And the best way to handle this is you don't want to just tell them what you think it is, even if you already think, you might say, well, it sounds like you got some pretty compelling evidence there. But right now, what we're doing is we're just gathering the data. We're gathering the data, and it's important that I conduct your case very thoroughly and make sure it gets the attention that it needs. And then, the case will, make sure a case is properly classified with a disposition of, what, based on the investigation, what I think it is.
Another big thing too with the government, not only can they cover up well, they also did quite the opposite. They over sensationalized it, right? They made it a stigma. They made it sound like crazy talk. They had people after learning about this Richard Doty guy, which blew my mind. When I don't know a tremendous amount. I'm just getting caught up from years and years of not paying attention.
Yeah.
But when I learned about this guy, I was out of my shoes like, holy shit, how's this guy getting away with this? And he works for the Air Force. So he would basically put stories in the ears of people, and some fabricated, some based on reality, right? But ultimately, when you poured in the right, and he selected people he was very selective. By him doing that, even if he went, so let's say hypothetically speaking, he goes up to a bona fide crazy person and he gives them real classified information. But when he goes to, so when this person repeats it, people look at the source, not the information. Like, this guy's nuts. We know that guy's nuts. So everything he's saying. So that's a habit that they do. And the more I learn about this, and this isn't just in ufology, this has been exhibited in riots where there's peaceful protest, and they have some guy in the crowd who's an affiliate of whatever organization, and he incites a problem. So there's a reason to shut that down. I mean, this is a common thing. So typically when I have this habit, or I had it, let me rephrase that. I had this habit of hearing people tell me these fantastic things. I'm like, oh, that's just too good to be true. And then I had, after watching this documentary and this gentleman, I was like, maybe I should really pay more attention, because you don't know. That's my big thing. I don't think there's bad information. I think you just need to know how to filter correctly, and you should definitely absorb as much as possible so you can learn as much as possible.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I should, and I'll mention too that, because I love and investigate so much, I'm also part of a paranormal investigation team. Matter of fact, we made the cover of Paranormal magazine. We've done a lot of radio show spots and things like that. And
yeah, Rick, get these guys on with you, man. Not tonight, but
I'd be happy to even get you on board with my other team, because I'm actually the lead investigator, and I'm the tech manager, and I'm the director of customer relations, kind of like everything all in three.
Right.
So when I, got invited with this guy to come on board with his paranormal investigation team, I brought my, things I learned, working as an investigator, and the ability to conduct a thorough investigation. And I'm good at doing interviewing. So he doesn't even the director doesn't even let anybody, interview the witness other than myself.
Right.
So, and I have a series of questions that I'll ask for a lot of these cases and stuff. And I let people tell their story, let them tell their story and give me their answers. And, and I just start, putting everything together.
And you rank it by, you have your own ranking system. Like, you could use a green pin for this seems plausible versus a yellow pin for I'm not so sure, and a red pin like, well, I'm glad you stopped in, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, because in any investigation, if you're a paranormal investigator looking for spirit activity, or you're a UFO investigator looking for extraterrestrial events, maybe alien activity or some type of alien spacecraft, it's very important to conduct a thorough investigation, an honest investigation. And, sometimes, you're not going to like, the way the result is. Like, every case I've done, I would love that to be, somebody's, I speak to someone on the phone, and they said, yeah, I saw this guy walking around in the back of the farm area, and it looked like, one of those species of what they call the great alien grays, the gray aliens.
Right.
And, and it was about this tall and all this kind of stuff. And, I would love to be able to see something like that. But yeah, it might make me a little bit nervous and stuff, but that would be like the coolest of the cool to come up close to something like that, really see it. But, you can't, that's not always going to happen. Sometimes, you can't make something appear that's just not there.
Right.
You have to go and check everything thoroughly out and do your homework. A lot of these witnesses are very credible. I did a case over a year ago of a lady that was actually in the state of Delaware. And she was a retired, she worked for the Dover Air Force Base, and was retired and everything. And so what happens is that she goes out on a stormy day. It was like cloudy out and it was like raining, that kind of thing. And she's out walking her dog, okay? And she sees that, there's like a pond. It's a residential street, right? And as you're walking on the sidewalk, there's a pond. And behind the pond, there's like all these trees and there's like a little hilly kind of area. So she thinks, this would be cool to take some photographs because there were some geese that were lined up along the pond. And I guess her dog was like just barking, like it saw something, and she thought it was suspicious the way her dog was barking, like it thought it saw something. And it wasn't until, because her dog was terrified and wanted to get back home. So she goes back home and she's now looking at her photos on her cell phone, and she thinks she sees a giant reptilian alien, okay? And she had pictures of that, and that was something that was in question. And the other thing in question was that there was a big shadow of this, what appeared like a saucer-shaped, big, giant, black-shaped object, okay, that appeared in the picture. So, I'm looking at the pictures, and one of the pictures that I'm looking at, we're starting off with interviewing the witness, and, she's trying to tell me over the phone, like, well, I have very good credentials being with the military, and she was in charge of operations and a lot of this stuff at Dover Air Force Base. And, I'm looking at this picture she shows me of an alien, and, it was definitely shaped like what you would think a giant reptilian with a reptile-looking face and everything, what it would look like, okay?
From your perspective in that photo, was it tall?
Well, yeah. It looked very tall. Really tall. A lot taller than what a person would be. And that was the first thing that kind of was suspect to me. But, my training tells me, I said, okay, you know what? Let's enlarge this photo 200%. So I enlarged the photo 200%. And then as I'm looking at it, she goes, look, you can see the eyes. And I'll tell you, because the thing with, people perceive images in their head a certain way depending on how they're looking at it.
Right.
Like, it's like maybe like you're looking at some kind of weird kind of painting or something, and then, they have a lot of multitude of colors, and you start asking people, what do you see in the photo? Some person might say, okay, well, I think I see a fish swimming in the water. Somebody else might say, okay, well, no, that looks like a bird to me that's like flying. So people could have the different interpretation about what they see. And so I'm looking at it, and I said, I enlarged it, and I go, that to me looks like it could be the head of a bear, okay? And she's like, well, like it could be a bear that's in a tree, and that's what you're seeing. This is actually a tree, and a bear climbed up the tree, and that's the eyes of the bear. So that was that. And then, the other thing, we were going to go out.
Well, did it end up being is that what it was? It ended up being a bear?
Well, no, what happened is this. So we go out to, since it was classified as a Class 3 case.
Right.
So we go out to the area that we're going to conduct investigation where this pond was. And beforehand, just to cover our bases, something like that, we call the local police or state troopers, if you will, and say, hey, we're going to be out in this area and we're going to be conducting an investigation. But we also start asking questions. Like, we'll call, like I call different police authority in the areas. And I ask them if, hey, has anybody reported anything, seeing anything like that? No. On so-and-so day, we haven't gotten any reports, anything. Okay. Sometimes they just think that, one of these crazy guys thinks, there's UFOs out there.
Right.
But that's okay, because that just comes with the job, the territory. But so that's expected, because some people believe there's some aren't. But so anyway, so we go out. I go to meet the chief investigator out there. And, we get out there, and I'm thinking like, okay, I brought out all these different jars because, we were going to take soil samples in case we felt that an alien spacecraft really landed by, because the craft that was reported was not far, was on one side on the left side of the pond, kind of on the left corner, and then back on the right was what the witness thought was, a giant reptilian alien. And so we get out there, we look at it, and we're comparing the exact spot in the photograph of what she thought was a giant reptilian. Okay. Well, clearly it wasn't a reptilian there. I mean, you could see why she thought it was, because, it had kind of shaped like the shoulders and the head and the body and that kind of thing.
Right.
But, it's sometimes, and that was just her fears that were playing on her, by the way. She was kind of a very skittish lady. But we get out there thinking like, we might have to take soil samples. And my first thing is, I'm going to go look for hair samples, because if it is a bear, I'm going to see if I could look at the bark on the tree and collect any hair samples. Well, there was no hair samples, okay? And the bark, I could take my fingers and easily peel the bark off. So when I pulled the bark off really easy with my fingers, you could see that the bark underneath looked like a real pink color, right? So I knew right away that the actual bear had climbed up there. Some of that bark would have been removed from the claws climbing up that tree, because it didn't take much effort to peel the bark back. And there was no sign of any bark being peeled, okay? There was no history of any bears even being in the area for maybe like a year ago or something. Some bear might have been close by. And I go to look up top, right? And I'll give you an example of how things that you see can appear a certain way. Like, remember I told you I thought that could be a bear up in there. So I'm looking, and there was a pile of pine cones that were brown pine cones. And I said, hey, there you go. That's what looked like the face of a bear, were the pine cones that were sitting up on the top of the tree. Okay. So no hair samples, no bear. So now that, expels what she thought was, that debunked what she thought was a reptilian, was actually just a tree.
Well, for certain people, when you have fear, that fear is a chemical response to something, right? So you're dumping adrenaline, you're shaking, and typically what fear. So when humans were first around and we were hiding from the big cats and the other things that are trying to murder us in the night, our imaginations run away, because that's pretty sure it's a mechanism so we can identify our assailant, right? And so It starts to play a trick on us. I'll give you a couple examples of a kind of a strange story anyway. About somewhere in September, I did an off-air interview. It was a former Christian Scientist. And, in the beginning of our conversation, I couldn't quite understand what he was trying to tell me. I was like, so what is your experience? He goes, all right, well, I'll give it to you. So anyway, long story short, he had pretty significant resources. The people backing him had some wealth. And this is in Kentucky. They're a very conservative Christian group. They wanted to debunk some local lore about UFOs there. And so after 2 years of investigations, he came across something, right? With all the sophisticated equipment he had and all the money backing him. And I asked him, I said, well, what did you come across? He goes, well, I don't know what they are, but I can tell you they're real. Like he didn't sound happy. He didn't sound amazed. He sounded to me like he was deflated. Like his life was just pulled out from underneath him. Sounded really upset about this. And so I said, well, can you elaborate on that? I mean, what did you see a being? Because I can't tell you what's controlling him. I could just tell you the phenomenon is real, and that's it. I said, okay. And so I hung up with that guy, and I, after the call, I'm like, this guy sounded miserable. Like him, by him speaking to me and saying it was real, like maybe it was his therapy. I don't know. He sounded really upset at the idea that they're even real, which brings you back to people, humanity. There's a lot of people like you and I, right? We're very like-minded. We're open-minded. We're okay with the idea there being extraterrestrial life. But then there's people like this guy where even though the facts were in his face, not that he doesn't believe it anymore. He's not pleased about it by any means. He's really upset by the idea of it being real. And it made me wonder what percentage of people does he represent? That scares me a little bit. And I'd spoken about this in several podcasts. Like, would there be that group of humanity, even if this is a peaceful, benign group of beings that are observing us, what percentage of humanity, if they ever present themselves to us, are like, we got to do something about it. They got to go. They can't be around us. They're the devil, right? I mean, that's a scary thought.
Yeah, because you have the people that think, okay, well, UFO, aliens, extraterrestrials and stuff. They must be there's some people that feel that they're demonic, they're demons that are just around to take them away from the Bible and all this kind of stuff. But the thing is, I mean, I call things as I see them. And so, that's part of conducting a thorough investigation. And a lot of times, I mean, even like that lady I was telling you about, the military thing, I mean, even with that, that saucer-shaped shadow, when I came out there, it just happened to be, it was the same type of day where it was a cloudy day. The sun wasn't out. Okay. And matter of fact, it looked like it was ready to rain. It didn't, but it was like really cloudy out. And the first thing I started looking at was I want to see how shadows could be casted. If shadows could be casted when the sun wasn't out. Because a lot of times you think of shadows, it's a sunny day, and on one side of the house, you got the shady side and maybe the sunny side on the other side of the house. Okay.
Right.
But then as I'm looking at this, I go, wait a second, man, I'm watching cars driving by, and I noticed that I could see shadows cast under the car. So I think, okay, well, you don't necessarily have to have the sunlight to have shadows cast. It could be an overcast day and you could still have shadows.
Right. So
I'm starting to study this area where the lady thought she saw the saucer shape. And I'm seeing, like, I figured I learned how the shadow got cast into that shape, because the light, as it went across there was a whole bunch of like sucklings, like small trees, and they were all close together. And as the shadow cast around it, light can bend itself, or shadow can bend to take a particular shape. And the first thing that was suspect to me when I'm looking at if this was an alien spacecraft. Okay, number one, let's look at the facts. Has there been any reportings, any sightings from anybody, the police? Had people that have driven their cars or walked on that block, looked across the street, across that pond, if they would have seen what they thought was an alien spacecraft, they probably would have called and reported to authorities. There was no such reports. And looking at the picture, the shadow, an alien spacecraft would look like, it would have more of a definitive shape. Right. Like you can see the shape of the body and maybe, okay, this looks like this is a window over here.
Well, that's assuming that they're using the same technology as us. You got to consider this is an advanced technology, and it can very well manipulate its surroundings. What if I was talking about Stephen Murr about them utilizing frequency and vibrations, and which is why you see the air around it being atomized. You know what I mean? Like it lights up. So that's an assumption.
And you figure the technology that they have. I mean, because like, you know, when you get reports from credible witnesses like pilots, airline pilots and military jet pilots and stuff like that are very credible witnesses. And, you know, and they say that, you know what, I mean, we couldn't even, with, you know, these F-18s or what have you, can't even catch these extraterrestrial vehicles because they fly at such incredible speeds that they don't have, they'll say, hey, you know, we don't have the technology to do that.
Right. And you know,
but the crazier thing, there's no propulsion. I mean, you don't see the propulsion coming out anywhere. There's no heat signature, no exhaustion, you know.
With people like David Fravor, I don't even want to call him credible. I want to call him absolution. Right? There's no he undoubtedly he's one of the better people to ask for it because his observation is real. There's no doubt for me with David Fravor. I mean, he's another big reason why when I first started going to do the podcast and I want to do the documentary and research, mostly in part of what I heard him say compelled me. Because I mean, if this guy's speaking that way and he's saying it, now there's no doubt. You know, there's like these groups on Facebook. One's called Alien UFOs History. There's another one, UFO Hunters. Well, anyway, on Alien UFOs History on Facebook, someone presented a story to me. It's called The ET Presence and the Threat to Humanity. And so I don't disregard anything. I'm willing to. That's why I surf a lot of these Facebook groups, and I even post to them. You know, I appreciate them. But sometimes I'll find something like this particular story, and it, like I was telling you earlier about that former Christian Scientist. When I read what this person sent me this, I think it was today or yesterday. When they sent me the YouTube link to it, I watched part of it, and it made me immediately think of that guy, that researcher, like that. He's a former Christian Scientist, so the connection for me was like overwhelming. So regardless, there's this person has a huge following on YouTube, and it's talking about the threat to humanity by the extraterrestrials. There's some valid stuff there. It does make sense. I mean, a lot of it is theory, which then again, with this subject, the majority of it's theory, but it also lets me know the representation of people and how we're thinking about what potentially is a threat or not. And other people could argue, and I even argue this, well, if they're going to attack us, they would have did it, you know, when we're primitive. Now we have nukes, but, you know, what is time to them? Because...
yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing. If they were going to attack us, they probably would have done it by now. And the thing about it is, if you think of, like, from an astronomer point of view, I mean, you know, we only know about a very small percentage of planets. I mean, we're like, if you ever see a picture on TV or in a book of the Milky Way galaxy, okay, which is really pretty, by the way, look at, but you're seeing all these beautiful colors. And there's people that, you know, where they live, you know, they can look up and see the Milky Way galaxy. And they're thinking in their head, they're pointing up and look, that galaxy is over there, not really realizing that we're actually in the Milky Way galaxy.
Yeah,
our planet
is in the middle of that. A small speck of that.
Yeah, we're like a little freckle, you know, just a little freckle.
I'm glad you say that. I was just talking about this with Dan and Mike. You know, there's this time where I was watching a documentary, and then I learned more about our Milky Way, our galaxy, and then the other galaxies in our universe, and I was amazed by this. And then when the theory comes around about us being one bubble of a universe amongst many other bubbles of universes, and then you try to sit there and imagine how the size of that, the scale of this, and then you realize how small you are. And I felt really depressed that day. Like I felt so insignificant. I was like, we're so stuck in 360. When I say 360, like our personal surroundings, we don't take into consideration the greater things there are. And so here's another big thing too. This is me in my early life. when you look at the amount of galaxies out there and the amount of planets, look, there's life out there. We just can't access it now. And even the one, I'm not talking about what our visitors are, because truth, I have a lot of theory on what they are. I don't absolutely know. But what I can say is it takes something like 100,000 years for a radio wave to cross the Milky Way. And SETI is set up to look for these radio waves. Meanwhile, if it takes 100,000 years and there's civilizations on the other end of the Milky Way and they've just got started with transmitting, we have hundreds of thousands of years to wait, And then,
exactly.
And then make room for the idea of the primitive planets out there. There's people in their Bronze Age. They're still in the Stone Age. They're not bipedal. They're trapped in their environment. They're on a planet solely made of water. Highly intelligent beings that can't escape their environment. So they won't be able to travel and find us, right? So when you consider all of that, it's really a narrow-minded state of being to say, well, there's only us. That's crazy talk.
Yeah. And if you think of look what's been discovered about, over the years, rover and all that, taking pictures of the surface of Mars and all that.
Yeah.
And the stuff that they've seen, the way that the surface of Mars has been carved out. I mean, that, astronomers are saying, well, yeah, there's definitely good evidence that there was water on this planet at one time. Although the atmosphere is different than what we have on Earth. But if you think of in the school textbook, there's so many your basic planets, and then there's your exoplanets, that kind of thing. There's a time when there was no exoplanets in the textbook. It was just the basic
right, planet.
Yeah. but now, scientists know now that, there's millions, probably billions of stars and planets that haven't even been discovered that are out there.
Yeah, and there's a crazy amount of them that are similar to Earth. A crazy amount.
And if you think about that, to think that that there couldn't be the possibility of any other living beings on any other planet out there.
It's crazy. Look, at the very minimum, there's plant life out there. At the very minimum, there's at the even more minimum, there's right now. It's being speculated on one of Jupiter's moons that there's bacteria living in an ocean, or that's they're at least at the very minimum expecting to find that if they send a probe. That's in our that's in our own solar system. So it's not feasible to say there's no life out there. It's absolute insanity. I was talking to a friend a long time ago, and we were discussing the idea of life elsewhere. And I for a very long time felt strongly that there's probably a bunch of Earth-like planets that they're still in their Roman age, right? That's still the time of Rome. It's bronze. And I think we would be the ones to discover them as they're getting to say their 50s and 60s. And hence then you have the circle of how things work, right? Because now we're visiting a planet. We found them. They're interesting. They're in their 50s. They're starting to use radio waves, starting to use cars. And our rules, like I think our observers have rules, are don't disrupt them. We have the technology now to observe them undetected. Let's watch and see how they evolve. Let's see how things go. Are they we'll see that they're utilizing powerful weapons, that harnessed by the sun kind of weapon. We're going to observe that closely too. And we don't want them to blow themselves up because this is interesting and we want to continue to study them. So let's prevent that from happening.
Yeah, exactly. If you think of, the way science has progressed, many years ago, we didn't have laser beams that could cut right through, big thick layers of steel.
Yeah.
And things like that. There's a lot of things, we didn't have. Who would ever think that, the cell phone would exist? It was, I remember growing up as a kid, there was, we had two phones. One was, just a dial-up phone, you dial it with the numbers, and it was hanging up on the wall. And then there was another one in another room, and then later on down the road, it's kind of like if somebody wanted to get a hold of you. Well, if you're working a day, there was no way they can get a hold of you. You had to be in the house at that time. If you're grocery shopping, they couldn't get a hold of you. If you're at the movies, they couldn't get a hold of you.
Yeah, now
so it's only when you were home.
Yeah, now I'm having full blown arguments with Alexa. You know? So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, now you get more. You get people calling you or texting your phone that you don't even know who the hell they are. They're not even your friends, and they're not even your family. And like, who the hell is this?
And people want to say, all these technologies you guys are looking into, it's not possible. Listen, I have a watch on my wrist right now. It's a Garmin Venue 2. This thing tells me when I'm not drinking enough water. It tells me when I'm having too much stress. It lets me know when I need more steps. It, in fact, tells me about my sleep, how I slept, and how I can improve my sleep. It's my watch.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It's crazy. That's crazy talk. You take this watch back to like just the 50s. Someone's going to shoot and kill you because you're clearly the devil.
Yeah. Exactly. And if you think about like, we're, the world that we live in, I mean, we're constantly being watched. I mean, people just, they drive down the road and they say, okay, well, there's a traffic light, and they have cameras in front of stores and buildings that they use to help solve crime scenes,
right?
Do crime investigations. And, a lot of times they'll look at the camera footage to catch criminals and that kind of thing. But then what about the unseen stuff? I mean, what they say, like, Google is watching, Google's like, we're all like the babies in diapers, and Google's like the mom on the pop who's watching our every move,
I had someone, another friend of mine some time ago, was like, look, man, you get rid of Google because everything you do, and it's like they read your mind and they advertise. I'm like, oh no, don't advertise exactly what I want. That's insane.
Yeah. I mean, you go look something up on a website that you're interested in buying.
Yeah, it's on Facebook right after.
yeah, exactly. And then all of a sudden the next day you go, on your phone, you're getting Google ads for something about maybe, hunting equipment or camping gear, or what have you. It was the same stuff that you were just looking at.
Listen, I experimented with that. I showed a friend of mine this. I looked up unicorns for a full day, and sure as hell on Instagram that night, unicorn dolls are popping up. So it's a thing, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay. I don't care. I mean, there's nothing I'm going to do in my private life that I'm really overly concerned about. I mean, if the government's like, oh, he's looking at porno, good. That's what I do.
Well, the next step is that the damn unicorn is going to come knocking on your door, right?
I'm okay. Hey, if it's appealing,
Yeah, exactly,
But, here's the other thing, too. And I've noticed a trend of abductions slowing down since 2009. And I kind of figured out why. And it's on the subject we're on currently. We have microphones and cameras everywhere in our homes, in the street. So observing us, outside of the initial, if they have to do, I don't know, whatever they got to do, a physical on you, outside of that, they don't need to grab you anymore. They could literally watch you. You carry a phone. They don't have to guess where you are anymore. They know just where you are. So we've made it all too easy for them to have an observation. Now imagine this, Rick. We're watching the lions out in Africa, and we always keep losing them. What if they all had a cell phone on them? We could hear, see, and understand. We know just where they are. It made that safaris easy now. We could just find our subjects. We don't even have to waste hours anymore. We know just where they are. We'll film when we're ready.
Well, think about it. I mean, the scientists, like, let's say they'll implant tracking devices, let's say like on sharks.
Right.
Because they want to see how that shark has migrated, where they've gone to, and that kind of thing. So, there's a multitude of ways to track animals or people, and, that kind of thing, watch your move. Yeah, I think fact that I think there's too much invasion of privacy from, it shouldn't be like, you're going to use Google search engine and all of a sudden, the next day you're going to get a bunch of advertisements on your phone from different people.
Yeah.
Google,
But it's the direction we're going in, because you got to understand. Well, I understand anyway. It used to be, remember you watched TV and the commercials came on, you had to eat those commercials till your show came back on, period. Whether you got up and got, well, now, because of streaming and YouTube and Netflix, people don't have to watch commercials. So now people want to get their product out there. We need to sell stuff. People need to buy stuff. That's what makes our world go around. That's the God's honest truth. Without marketing and without buying and without selling, we're heading right back for the Stone Age, right? Barbaric times.
That's right. That's right.
It's a wheel that has to turn. Is it a little aggressive at times? Yeah, I think it is. But when I'm getting advertisements for things I'm looking up, I'm okay with that because it's stuff I'm actually interested in. Now, if I go on Facebook or I go on YouTube or I go on Netflix or Hulu and they start showing me shit like female products and they start showing me cooking where I'm like, that doesn't appeal to me. Then I'm aggravated because I don't want to learn it. And I'll give you a good idea of that. I'm watching YouTube on a separate channel today. I watch a lot of pro billiards, and on one of the commercials was an Allstate commercial. I'm like, I don't give a shit about insurance. Had you advertised something that appealed to me, I probably wouldn't have even cared, or even not. I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't care. I probably wouldn't even notice. But they showed me something that didn't appeal to me. So at some level, they're responsible to have these algorithms so they could know how to tailor to you. So this way, when you get the advertisement, you're not so aggravated. Like, all right, well, that's cool. I mean, I like that. I'm not going to buy it, but I like it. Versus you're learning about Go from Hertz. And I don't give a shit about Go from Hertz, you know? So. Yeah,
well, that's why, like, you know, I have people sometimes, you know, they'll send me, you know, news feeds from their phone.
Yeah.
And me personally, I refuse to get any news app on my phone.
Same.
That is going to make me force me to give them my email. Why do you need my email address to send me news feeds? And because, you know, again, they're going to either sell your email address or
your
use
number,
it some information to your phone number. So, you know, I'll get people to send me news feeds, and I go on there, and I go, you know, I'll say, you know what? Don't send me any more news clips of anything that is going to force me to go on, you know, my app, go on the Apple Store application, right. You know, application, and download the app, the phone app for that news feed, because then I'm feeling like I'm being forced. I don't like to be forced into doing something I don't want to do.
I'm right there with you. You know, I have this thing. You know, telemarketers don't call me anymore at all, because whenever they do, I don't just disregard their call. I talk to them. Even when it's the robotic one, I'll hit the button until I get a person, and I will put that person on hold so many times and come back for like one guy's, I'm not kidding, a student loan that I never had. It's like, yeah, we can pay it off. Like, oh, that's cool, man. Hey, can you hold on? Let me go get my information. I'll go walk around the house, do blah, 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 come back, pick it up. Like, yeah, so what do I got to do from here? Like, well, you have a credit card? Like, oh, yeah, it's in the other room. Hang on a second. I'll walk away, you know?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I'm on the do not, they don't call me. They put me on do not call because of that. What else am I going to do? I'd keep them on the phone talking about nonsense. I had one guy trying to tell me he's going to sell me life insurance. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, if you buy my toaster right now, cash, I'll consider it. And they hang up on you and they don't call again. They know it's
it's funny that happens. Yeah, because I remember there's some scammer guys from another country. I think they're like from India or something.
Yeah.
I'm getting this call, and, you know, and I knew they were trying to pull some kind of scam. And so, you know, I come up with this off the wall story and of something like, okay, now you're trying to scam me, so now I'm going to try to scam you.
Yeah.
And then the guy was actually laughing. He goes, that's really pretty good. So he knew that I was just playing around with them, just giving them a line.
Yeah.
So, you know, but it's kind of like, you know, you wasted my time, now I'm going to waste your time. You know, it's kind of how it felt.
Yeah, my favorite ones when they're trying to offer senior citizen stuff, and I'm not a senior citizen. I'm like, well, I mean, I'll take it. Will you tell anyone? You're not going to tell me, right? And the guy's like, well, you're not a senior citizen. I'm like, well, no. I mean, you called me. You should know, right? You have my info. He's like, well, you know, it's not feeling like, but you sure I can't have it? Like, in other words, that guy hung up on me and he tells his colleagues, hey, man, just don't call his number in. This guy's a waste of time. You know, so I don't get called by him, which is a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
You know, and I should mention too, not that I work with them or anything, but, you know, I ran into this app one time called DuckDuckGo.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, they have like a little, you know, duck thing. Yep. And what's cool about that is you can use your search engine to look things up, and it'll block any companies out there that are trying to hijack your phone. You know,
paid for. You know what I use that for, DuckDuckGo? If I find, and I suggest you do it too. Like whenever I hear information from someone, I want to like fact check it. I'll look it up on Google. I'll look it up on Yahoo, and then I'll look it up on DuckDuckGo, and then and this way I could see what's actually filtering versus what's being sensationalized. And you'd be surprised. On DuckDuckGo, a lot of the advertiser ones are gone. But that being said, still, I'm pro Google. I agree with what they're doing. I see, because at the long term, I see where they're going. I mean, it only makes sense that we have to have us, but it's also, like I said, about even with MUFON and other organizations, it's healthy to have multiple, so you can get different sources of information. Just when you want to fact check, you want the facts, That's
true. And if you think about it, when people say, like, if you don't know something, what do they say? Just go ahead and Google it. Why do they say the word Google it? Because Google's the biggest search engine.
Yeah, it's imprinted.
They've been around a long time. Yeah, and they'll say. So if you don't know a particular subject, I mean, Google, I mean, that's like the largest library in the world. I mean, if you go to the biggest physical library in the world that you can walk into, I mean, that's just like a crumb of information. And you take these, millions of websites throughout the world, and I don't think there's ever been a question that I haven't asked on Google that somebody else hasn't asked the same question.
Oh, no, yeah. Humanity has a collective consciousness, whether we want to accept that or not. We're unique to a point, but there's always going to be another me out there, and there's always going to be another you out there. And that's what makes us so great as a species, is diversity.
That's right.
I hear people all the time. I have people ask me questions like, hey, man, how do I do this? Like, you ever heard the University of YouTube? Hop on there. I'm pro YouTube. If I want to learn something, go to YouTube. And if you find one guy you don't like, there's 4 million other ones, and they know just what they're doing. I literally learned how to put my TV stand together with YouTube, right? This big complex thing. And
exactly. Or here's another thing for you. And I use this all the time. How, YouTube, I mean, is a place for everything. I mean, there's, if you're looking for music, there it is on YouTube.
Yeah.
Music videos, if you want to watch, like, different things. Like, let's say, you want guitar lessons, you can get free guitar lessons. Or you want to learn how to fix your car, maybe how to do a brake job or something. So you type in the make and model of your car, or, how to do a brake job on this car. And a lot of times you can bring up certain makes and models of things, or, something that you don't know how to do. And it's really pretty cool because, you're getting free information on how to do things. I mean, I had a situation in the garage where there's a cable on each side of the garage door, on the side, that goes around a spool.
Right.
It's one of those automatic garage door, and the thing had come off, right? So the garage door, like, when you go to open it, it would stop about halfway in the middle. So when we checked it out, we found out that, you had to help push it up to get it all the way up. Well,
right.
It was relying on the spring in the middle, but one of the side cable was off spool. So I went and looked on YouTube, and I saw 6-7 videos. I had to go through a few to find the one that I thought pertained most to my project.
Right.
But eventually, I'm like, check this out. There it is, man. That's what I'm looking for,
Yeah. Now picture this. I use everything I buy. I look for reviews on YouTube, every single thing. And I don't stop at the first video. I spend time on multiple videos learning, because before I buy this computer, is it good? Let me hear what these guys say. And I listen to all these people and all these reviews. I typically I'm pretty good about filtering out the ones I know are there for money, right? They have an affiliate agenda. But outside of that, I use YouTube for those things. Before I buy it, I look it up. I mean, I use YouTube a lot. Now,
yeah, it's amazing.
Now rewind back in the day when you wanted to buy something, you need to you wanted to find out info on it. You had to go, talk to the sales guy? What his agenda was, to sell it to you. And then you go talk to your friends. You better hope 2 or 3 of them had it, right? And then top it off. Now, your garage breaks and you want to read, or you want to learn how to fix it yourself. Well, back in the day, you had to go to the library and get a book and learn. And what if that book wasn't the right one? You wasted 4 hours reading this book. Like,
you might be looking forever and finding out, wow, I can't find a book. And then you resulted to having to call some garage guy to do something because you wanted to do it yourself and you weren't able to do it.
Thank God for YouTube, man. I'm sorry. I mean, a lot of people look, I don't agree with everything they do, but look, I spend a lot of time, like you said, music, research, entertainment, live billiards. I mean, I paid a subscription fee, so I don't have to have the commercials. Sorry, guys, if you hear that. So it's just, that's that's today's reality. Now that based on everything we just said, there's an extraterrestrial advanced life form monitoring humanity. Is it really that hard for them to learn about us now in this modern age? They know everything. They have it right in the cloud that they could most likely easily access if they're advanced. Monitoring humanity has become far too easy for them. We've done the work for them. That's why you're hearing far less cases of abductions, and even the ones that are still being visited. The majority, I don't hear negative from. I don't hear negative stories from. You know, the few negative stories I hear are people in positions of power, and they don't like not being in control. That's the only ones, and it's very seldom I hear those. So,
well, you know, I mean, I've always said, I mean, you know, YouTube, the internet. I mean, YouTube's just part of the internet, really. But I mean, if you think about it, the internet is the source of everything good and everything evil. Sure. You know, it's got everything. You know, what do you want? You know, you want to learn about godly stuff and volunteering for the church, or you want to learn how to become a Satanist. It's all right. It's all there, man. It's everything good and evil. It's all there.
And the same could be said in the human tongue before YouTube, before technology. There's these people that they call themselves messiahs, or they're religious leaders, or they're just charismatic people. And so prior to the internet and all the good and evil on the internet, a lot of people say the internet's full of bad and good. Humans were doing it first. We were compelling people. We were conning people, manipulating them. And when I say the word manipulation, I don't mean it in a bad way. Sometimes you can manipulate in a great way, right? You're conveying a great message as a religious leader, and you're filling people with hope and et cetera, versus the other guy who's using that same manipulation for the opposite. So it's the only difference between man then, man now, is technology is getting to more people, and it's getting there faster, and people could form their own opinions and agendas instantly, as opposed to, well, I'll go back and see Paul next week and see what his ideas are on this, and I'll form my opinion then. Now it's just fast. You can form your opinion minutes. So
like that. Oh yeah. I mean, seconds. I mean, without, you don't have to have a library card, you have to,
I mean, it's
drive to the library to get that information. Like somebody, there's a heavy storm out there, a blizzard, and, it's not safe to take the car out, but you need to find out information. Unless your internet's down, I mean, you could still go online and look up information.
Yeah, I mean, I predict in the next 10 years, there won't be news anymore. They won't need it. I mean, I started a podcast. All I really had to do is get equipment and get online. I started a podcast. I don't think. Yeah. I think news is going to change significantly over the next decade. I don't predict there being stations any longer, right? Because if you look at what Netflix is doing, and Hulu, and even YouTube. YouTube has YouTube TV, right? You can subscribe to this and even get premium subscriptions. I don't think we're going to see very many networks coming soon at all. In fact, it's sadly to say, if I want to learn facts on what's going on in the world today, it's a mixture of things for me. Anywhere from Joe Rogan to other podcasts. I don't even look at the news anymore. I count on people like Joe Rogan and these other podcasts to watch the news, and then they get to filter it. So when I hear it, I'm not hearing horse shit,
Yeah, they'll talk about the information and stuff that's out there,
And it's good. I mean, it's healthy, I mean, if you didn't have it, what would end up happening is you have a society that we once upon a time we were, where we were falling just in line with whatever the news said, that was the facts. And it's unfortunate that people were like that at one time. There's another YouTuber, ZDoggMD. I like that guy. You know what I mean? He's pretty straightforward to the point. It's entertaining at the same time, but he gives you facts. So ZDoggMD, Joe Rogan, and Lex Friedman, if I want to learn sciencey stuff, I mean, I don't look at the news anymore. That era for me is dead. It's over.
Yeah.
It's like listening to politicians. I can't do it. I just can't. I'm apolitical. And that stems from me being a kid watching two politicians speak the same positive message, but then hate one another and bash each other's ideas, even though they're the same one. It's like, what?
Exactly.
That's insanity. Yeah. That's crazy. So.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Well, Rick, before we close tonight, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, if you don't mind me
put it out there,
throwing my website address out there. Yep. So Okay, so if any of you listeners out there, if you have you want to report a UFO sighting or some type of event that took place, you could visit my website called ERC, which stands for Extraterrestrial Research Center. And the address is www.erc2.com. So it's www.erc number 2, not the word 2, but number 2.com. You could go on to my website. There's a tab that's right there on the front of the site to report any type of sighting that, maybe you haven't seen anything recently, but, you never know. Maybe a month or two down the road, you'll run into something and you remember our time here on the podcast and remember my website address. And not only that, there's some great videos there, and there's some areas about research and things. There's some education. There's a UFO glossary in there that you can learn about different terms. So there's a lot of great information you can get by visiting the website. So
and I'll put
it's
put
great.
links
I
in there.
appreciate.
Yeah, I'll put some links in the description so people could find a website, and even in my community, I'll make sure there's a roadmap to it.
That's great, man. I really appreciate it. Well, it's been a real honor coming on to your show today, and it was great that we had a chance to do the podcast together and have a chance to talk. Definitely enjoyed the show.
Yeah, indeed, Rick. And I know I'll have you on again. We'll talk soon, sir.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. That sounds great.
Have a good night, Rick.
Yeah, you too.